The moment I saw Ryan's twisted smile in that dimly lit parking garage, I knew my 15-year friendship had been nothing but a calculated lie. Blood dripping from my knuckles, I stared at the man I once called brother and realized I'd finally become the monster he always claimed I was. Growing up in Westbrook, Connecticut, Ryan Henderson was more than just my best friend. He was my lifeline in a world that often felt too big and too cruel for a shy kid like me. I still remember that rainy Tuesday in 7th grade when he plopped down next to me in the cafeteria, sliding half his peanut butter sandwich across the table with a crooked grin that would become so familiar over the years. "You look like you could use this more than me," he said, and just like that, a brotherhood was born. Our teenage years blurred together in a montage of stolen moments, late-night video game marathons where we'd curse at pixelated enemies until sunrise, summer afternoons wasting away at Harborview Park, plotting our futures between bites of melting ice cream. Ryan was there when my parents' marriage imploded in spectacular fashion during sophomore year, sneaking me into his basement when I couldn't bear the screaming matches upstairs at my house. "Family isn't always blood, Marcus," he'd whispered in the darkness, the blue glow of his TV illuminating our makeshift fortress of blankets and pillows. "Sometimes it's who shows up when everyone else walks away." And show up he did for 15 years, through every milestone and meltdown. When I got my first car, Ryan was riding shotgun before I even had the keys in my hand. When his mom got sick during senior year, I sat with him through endless hospital nights, smuggling in his favorite chocolate shakes past disapproving nurses. There was an easiness between us that I'd never found with anyone else, the kind of friendship where silence felt as comfortable as conversation. We finished each other's sentences, knew each other's orders at every restaurant in town, and could communicate volumes with just a raised eyebrow across a crowded room. "You were practically twins separated at birth," my mother would say, shaking her head as we raided her refrigerator after school. I can still picture Ryan standing as my best man at my cousin's wedding, both of us barely 21 and swimming in rented tuxedos, him whispering terrible jokes in my ear to keep me from falling asleep during the endless ceremony. "When it's your turn," he said, clinking his champagne glass against mine, "I'll give the most embarrassing speech this town has ever heard." Jessica came into the picture during our college years. I'd spotted her in our economics class, her dark curls falling over her notebook as she scribbled furious notes. For weeks, I could barely form coherent sentences around her, and Ryan had witnessed every painful, awkward interaction. "Just talk to her like she's a human being, not a goddess," he'd coach, physically pushing me toward her after class one day. That night, I'd called him, breathless with excitement that she'd agreed to coffee. "She's perfect, man," I'd gushed into the phone. "Smart, funny, she even likes those weird foreign films you're always making me watch." Ryan had paused just a bit too long before responding. "That's great, Mark, really great." If I close my eyes now, I can still see us all together at his parents' lake house that summer, Jessica fitting into our world like she'd always been there, Ryan teaching her to skip stones across the water at sunset, the three of us talking until the stars came out. In my memory, his smile never quite reached his eyes when he looked at us together, but I'd brushed it off as a trick of the fading light. To us, Ryan had toasted one night, raising his bottle toward the sky. The Three Musketeers. How could I have known then that one of us was already plotting betrayal? First signs of trouble appeared so gradually that I almost mistook them for normal shifts in our friendship. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags waving frantically in my face. 6 months into my relationship with Jessica, I landed the job I'd been dreaming about since freshman year, junior developer at Vertex Technologies, a kind of place with free snacks and ping-pong tables that made my previous retail gigs look like medieval torture. When I called Ryan to share the news, his congratulations came just a heartbeat too slow. "Wow, that's awesome, Marcus," he said, his voice audibly flat. Guess all those late-night scamming could finally paid off. I brushed it off as surprise. After all, I'd been rejected twice before. But then came the comments. Little drops of poison disguised as friendly banter. "Don't get too comfortable," he warned over beers that weekend. Tech companies are notorious for layoffs. My cousin's friend lasted 3 months before they axed his whole department. Jessica squeezed my hand under the table. "Don't listen to him. They'd be idiots to let you go." Ryan's smile tightened. "Just being realistic, Marcus knows I'm looking out for him." The next month, I noticed Whisper stopping when I entered the break room at work. Strange looks from colleagues I barely knew. It wasn't until Alicia from HR caught me alone in the elevator that I understood why. "I hope everything's okay at home," she said carefully. "If you need someone to talk to." "Talk about what?" I asked, genuinely confused. She shifted uncomfortably. "Well, your friend Ryan mentioned you've been having some personal issues affecting your work, something about anger management." My blood ran cold. Ryan had never set foot in my office building. That night, I confronted him at our usual bar. "Did you tell people at my job that I have anger issues?" He looked genuinely shocked, beer halfway to his lips. "What? No way, man. Must be someone else talking shit." He leaned forward, concern etched in his features, "But now that you mention it, you have been pretty on edge lately." Jessica noticed it too. "Jessica said that." My stomach twisted. "Not in those words," he backpedaled. But she asked if I thought you seemed stressed, the new job and all. I couldn't shake the uneasiness that followed me home that night. When Jessica came over, I casually mentioned what Ryan had said. That's weird, she frowned, setting down her wine glass. I never said anything like that. We barely talked about your job at all. The pit in my stomach deepened. 3 weeks later, Jessica's expression changed when I picked her up for dinner. Her eyes were guarded, her smile strained. Everything okay? I asked as we slid into our favorite booth at Marino's. She stared at her menu for a long moment. Ryan showed me something today, said he didn't know what to do about it. My chest tightened. Showed you what? Text messages between you and Sarah. She finally met my eyes. From last weekend when you said you were working late. Sarah, our mutual friend from college who had moved to Boston years ago. I hadn't texted her in months. That's impossible, I said, pulling out my phone. Look at my messages. Jessica took it reluctantly, scrolling through. These aren't the same ones he showed me in those you were. She swallowed hard, making plans to meet at a hotel, talking about how I wouldn't find out. I spread through my veins. He showed you screenshots. She nodded, eyes welling with tears. Jessica, those were fake. I haven't even seen Sarah since her birthday last year. I could see her wanting to believe me, but doubt had already taken root. Ryan had planted it expertly. The final blow came during my presentation to Meridian Industries, a client worth millions to Vertex. I'd prepared for weeks, staying late every night perfecting my slides and demos. Ryan had even stopped by my apartment the night before, bringing pizza and offering to look over my materials one last time. Standing before a room of executives the next morning, I opened my presentation file to find nothing. Blank slides. Empty demo folders. 3 weeks of work vanished. I fumbled, sweating through my new shirt as I tried to recreate my points from memory. The decision-makers exchanged glances. My boss's face turned to stone. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Heard about the presentation. Tough break. Drinks tonight to drown your sorrows. I stared at the message, a strange calm settling over me as pieces clicked into place. The rumors at work. The fake messages to Jessica. And now, my mysteriously vanished presentation after he'd been the last person with access to my laptop. The Ryan Henderson I thought I knew, the boy who'd shared his sandwich, a teenager who'd offered shelter during my parents' divorce, the man who stood beside me through everything, was a carefully crafted illusion. And as I sat there, watching the 3 dots bounce as he typed another message probably filled with full sympathy, I made a decision. This wasn't just about saving my relationship or my job anymore. This was war. I sat in my car outside Ryan's apartment, gripping a manila envelope that contained everything: the doctored screenshots, the HR complaints, the system logs showing his IP address accessing my work files. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. The rage I'd been suppressing for months had crystallized into something cold and sharp. Through his window, I could see him moving around, probably getting ready for another night of playing the concerned best friend. This same routine he perfected over 15 years. My phone buzzed, another text from Jessica asking where I was. I hadn't told her what I discovered, how deep the betrayal really went. The truth had hit me like a freight train 2 days ago. I was digging through old emails, building my case against Ryan, when I found an email chain between him and Chris, his college roommate. Dozens of messages spanning years, all about Jessica. About his obsession with her since high school. About how he'd waited, watching me stumble into everything he deserved. Marcus was always the lucky one, he'd written. Perfect job, perfect girl, time to see how he handles some real adversity. The timestamp on that email. 3 days before I got my job at Vertex. I closed my eyes, remembering all those late-night gaming sessions, all the times he'd helped me move apartments, stood by me at my dad's funeral. 15 years of friendship, and every moment of it had been a lie. A mask he wore while waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Ryan. Hey man, you okay? Jessica's worried about you. Even now, he was playing both sides. I switched off my phone and grabbed the envelope. The security door clicked open as a resident left, and I caught it before it closed. My footsteps echoed in the hallway as I climbed to the 3rd floor. I could hear music playing behind his door. The same indie rock playlist he always had on when we hung out. For a split second, muscle memory almost made me knock our secret pattern, 3 quick taps followed by 2 slow ones. A code we'd used since middle school to recognize each other. Instead, I pulled out my key, the emergency spare he'd given me years ago in case anything ever happened. The irony wasn't lost on me. I turned the key, pushed open the door, and found him sitting at his desk, headphones on, completely unaware. On his screen was a half-written email to Jessica, carefully crafted words of concern about my increasingly erratic behavior. You forgot to log out of your email last time you used my laptop, I said. He spun around, headphones clattering to the floor. For the first time since this all began, I saw real fear in his eyes. I stared at Ryan, watching his face drain of color. The moment stretched between us like a taut wire. "Marcus," he started, rising from his chair, hands raised in surrender. "You don't understand what?" "Sit down," I growled, tossing the manila envelope onto his desk. "Open it." His hands trembled as he reached for it, paper spilling across his keyboard. I watched him scan each page, his breathing growing more ragged with each revelation. "How long have I been your project, Ryan?" My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. 15 years of waiting for me to fail. He looked up, tears welling in his eyes. It wasn't supposed to go this far. That's when I noticed a small black notebook tucked beneath his keyboard. I lunged forward and grabbed it before he could react. The leather was worn, pages doja from constant use. "Marcus, don't," he pleaded, but I was already flipping through it. My blood froze. It wasn't just Jessica. Page after page detailed every job interview I'd ever had, relationships that fell apart mysteriously, opportunities that vanished at the last minute. Notes in the margins introduced Marcus to incompatible personalities should create tension within 3 months and mentioned the management position at Vertex to Marcus started application sabotage protocol. But what shattered me was a folded photograph tucked into the back cover. My father and Ryan, arms around each other's shoulders, both smiling at the camera. "What is this?" I whisper, my fingers suddenly numb. Ryan slumped back in his chair. "Your dad came to me 6 months before he died. He knew something was wrong with him, but he hadn't told you yet. He was worried about you." In memory surfaced Dad asking if I'd considered applying to Vertex, mentioning how their health insurance covered experimental treatments. How he'd seemed desperate for me to take that particular job. "He made me promise to look after you," Ryan continued, voice hollow. "But then I saw how perfectly everything fell into place for you, the job I'd been chasing for years, the girl." The room tilted sickeningly. "You're saying my dying father asked you to help me, and you turned it into this sick game?" He flinched. "It wasn't like that at first. I really did try to help, but watching you sail for life while I struggled, knowing Jessica looked at you the way she'd never look at me." I flipped to the last written page of the notebook. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a sabotage plan. It was a suicide note. "I'll be gone by the time you find this," it read. "You deserve to know the truth." I looked up at Ryan, really seeing him for the first time in months. The hollowed cheeks. The pill bottles peeking from his desk drawer. The resignation in his eyes. "You were never supposed to find out," he whispered. Tonight was going to be the end. The envelope dropped from my hand, its contents suddenly meaningless in the face of this twisted revelation. I stood there in Ryan's office, a man caught between rage and pity, holding his death sentence in my hands. The world had narrowed to just us two, the betrayer and the betrayed, locked in a moment that would define both our futures. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "You destroy my life, then check out? That's your grand solution?" Ryan's shoulders sagged under the weight of exposure. "What else is there, Marcus? I've ruined everything." His eyes, once bright with our shared jokes and plans, now looked hollow, dead long before his planned departure. I thought of my father then, imagining his final days, worried about his son's future. Had he known what darkness lurked in Ryan's heart? Had he suspected that his request for help would twist into this nightmare? My fist clenched around the notebook, knuckles white. You don't get to decide when the story ends. Without warning, I grabbed Ryan's phone from his desk and dialed 911, watching his panicked expression as I reported a suicide risk. When I hung up, the silence between us felt electric. "You are going to live, Ryan," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You are going to face what you've done not just to me, but to yourself." The paramedics arrived within minutes, Ryan too defeated to resist as they escorted him out. I followed them to the hospital, watching from a distance as they admitted him to the psychiatric ward. Something my father once told me echoed in my mind: the true measure of a man isn't how he treats his friends, but how he handles his enemies. 3 months passed. Fall turned to winter, and the world moved on as it always does. I met with Jessica over coffee, our first real conversation since everything fell apart. "You could have destroyed him completely," she said, studying my face. "Why didn't you?" I stared into my cup, remembering that night in Ryan's office. Because that's what he would have done, and I not him. The revelation had changed me. Each morning, I woke without the crushing weight of betrayal I'd carried for so long. I'd visited Ryan twice in treatment, not for his sake, but for my own. To remind myself that forgiveness wasn't about absolving him, but freeing myself. Yesterday, I found a letter in my mailbox, Ryan's handwriting, but steadier than the frantic scrawls in his notebook. "I don't expect forgiveness," he'd written. "But I want you to know I'm facing what I did. Your father would be proud of the man you've become, not because you succeeded, but because you didn't let my darkness change who you are." I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer, next to the photo of my father and Ryan in happier times. Some friendships couldn't be salvaged, but perhaps some humanity could. My phone rang. It was my new boss at Vertex. The promotion had come through after all. The job my father had wanted for me, with benefits that would have saved his life had he only taken his own advice. Life's cruelest irony. As I hung up, I gazed out my window at the winter sunset. Ryan had lost everything: his job, his reputation, our friendship, but he was alive, facing his demons one therapy session at a time. I had gained perspective that no success could have taught me. Dad had been right all along. He'd known I would need looking after, just not in a way Ryan had interpreted. He'd wanted me to learn resilience, not reciprocation. Standing there, watching day fade into night, I finally understood that true revenge wasn't about destroying your enemy. It was about refusing to become them. I opened my phone and typed a message to Ryan: lunch next month when you're out, not as friends, but as two people who need to make peace with the past. Some wounds never fully heal, but perhaps they didn't need to. Sometimes the scars reminded you of what you survived and who you chose to become in spite of it all. I looked out over the city lights that night, turning Ryan's letter over in my hands. The anger that once consumed me had transformed into something else, not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. My father's wisdom echoed through time. We don't overcome our enemies by destroying them, but by refusing to let them destroy what makes us human. In those darkest moments after discovering Ryan's betrayal, I'd stood at a crossroads. One path led to vengeance, swift, complete, devastating. The other path was harder, longer, less satisfying to that primal part of me that screamed for justice. I chose the harder path. That choice saved two men that night: Ryan from his despair, and me from becoming what I despised. Some wounds don't heal clean, they leave marks on your soul that change you forever. But those scars remind me daily that we're defined not by what others do to us, but by what we do when pushed to our limits. In the end, my revenge wasn't taking everything from Ryan, it was showing him that he couldn't take everything from me.